Before you Google about your newborn at 2 a.m., watch this because what you're about to Google is probably normal. Let's talk about breathing sounds. Breathing sounds is probably one of the most common things that parents Google. So, a lot of breathing sounds are actually normal. Your baby's airways are small, so they can sound a little noisy at times. Things I want you to pay more attention to is if your baby is working to breathe, meaning that you see the skin around the chest or the neck like pulling in, also called retractions. That's something that I want you to pay closer attention to and seek out help for. If your baby is changing colors because of their breathing sound, that is something that needs further evaluation. If you have concerns, reach out because any type of breathing concern, regardless of whether you think it's normal or not, should be evaluated by a pediatric provider to make sure that it's not something concerning. Another common topic that's Googled is hiccups in newborns. So, hiccups in newborns typically happen around a feeding. And if your baby is otherwise healthy, it's not concerning. Hiccups are caused by either immature diaphragm. And the reason that typically happens around feeding is because if your baby swallows a lot of air during the feeding, if your baby eats really quickly, or if your baby gets too full, that can kind of irritate the diaphragm and cause hiccups. But usually it's nothing to fix, there's nothing to do. They'll go away on their own. Sneezing. This surprises parents a lot, but sneezing can actually be normal. Your baby's nasal passages are very small, so it's actually a very healthy reflex that helps to keep those nasal passages clear. Babies can be very sensitive to dust. When they're first born, they could be trying to clear mucus, amniotic fluid, and sometimes if the baby gets milk in their nose, they'll be sneezing to clear that milk that got in their nose. So sneezing doesn't necessarily mean that your baby is sick or has a cold, but if you notice other symptoms like fever, difficulty breathing, or not feeding well, that's when you need to pay closer attention and get your baby evaluated by a pediatric provider. So rashes. This one can look alarming, but a lot of times it's a very common thing in newborns. So let's talk a little bit about some common rashes in newborns. You have a common rash that kind of looks red and splotchy and can happen all over the body. Sometimes it moves. It's called erythema toxicum. It'll go away with time. The second rash is called pustular melanosis. It kind of looks like pimples, and then when it dries out, it leaves something that looks a little bit like freckles on the baby's skin. But once again, something that will fade with time, nothing that needs treatment. Another thing that you might see that a lot of parents get concerned about is a lot of times it's on the nose. It's called milia, and it looks like little white pinpoint marks on the nose. It's usually a buildup of keratin, and that's something that also resolves over time. Another common rash is a heat rash, and it can appear on parts of the skin where they're actually folded on top of each other. So in between a roll, and sometimes it can happen when your baby is overdressed. So that's why it's very important to not overdress your baby. The times with rashes that I would like for you to pay closer attention and seek out help is if that rash also has a fever or there's any pus with the rash, or if the baby is very sleepy and hard to wake up. That is when I want you to reach out to your pediatric provider for guidance and to possibly get further evaluation. Let's talk about newborn congestion. Newborn congestion is very common and doesn't necessarily mean that your newborn is sick. Their nasal passages are very small, so if just a little bit of mucus gets into their nose, it can sound very dramatic. And because they only breathe out of their noses in the beginning, sometimes they will struggle to breathe out of their nose instead of just opening up their mouth. So, things that you can talk to your pediatric provider about if your newborn is congested is adding saline drops or a humidifier in the room. But I also want to talk a little bit about not overusing suction or a bulb syringe when your baby has congestion in their nose, because that can also make swelling happen, and that can also make congestion seem, it can also make congestion worse. Not everything you Google means something is wrong. It might just mean that you're learning your baby. Newborn care made simple.